Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to World This Morning. I am your host Hajra Sati, and joining me is my wonderful co-host and also happens to be a mentor, Fahim Bangesh. Assalamu alaikum, Fahim, and how are you doing today?
Wa alaikum assalam. Doing very well. Thank you very much, and a very good morning to you too. And it's a nice morning, I would say, just nice.
Yes, I can feel that, your actions and your thoughts are not matching because you're perspiring. But I think I'm really glad that the humidity levels have at least dropped down in the weather, because monsoon season, I mean, we all love rain, but the humidity level was too high and we really don't love it at the moment.
As we were talking about hope, and definitely there is a ray of hope that the humidity levels have gone down. So yeah, I'm hoping for the best that we will have good weather very soon, and I can't really wait for the winters.
Right,
honestly.
right, Fahim. So I wanted to ask a question from you, and I think I have been asking this question from a lot of people, and I do get some very interesting answers. But there are moments, especially as a human, when you're feeling very high, and then there are moments when you're feeling very low. There are weak moments on our humans, on our life as general, especially when you feel that things are not working and fate is doing a lot of things. So what do you do when you are feeling very low? How do you keep out from that bias of not, putting into that spiral of depression and hopelessness? So what's your hack in dealing well with that, low moments?
First of all, at times I think I'm bipolar.
Okay.
Because I go through the ups and downs, like you said, everybody does. But when I do, the first thought that I get, okay, maybe I'm bipolar. Okay, the second thought, obviously one has to cope up with that. One has to have coping mechanisms. So A, I read. B, I go out. I'm talking when I'm down, right?
Okay, right.
So reading helps a lot. Meditation, deep breathing, taking a walk, taking the stroll, especially if you can go out with a loved one, that helps a lot, because you need to vent out at times. At times we build up so much negative energy inside of us that we need to vent it out.
That's true.
But actually that happens if you know what to do. Because usually people don't know what to do. They usually take it out on their loved ones. They vent it out in the wrong manner. They channelize their energies in the wrong manner. And that is exactly where reading, where literacy, where education plays its part.
Thank you so much for wonderfully putting it out there. But obviously when I'm feeling very low, so I think the first thing that I want to do is, so I'm not a very extrovert sort of a person, so I don't go and interact with a lot of people, but I do journal. So journaling, I think, is my best catharsis. I write letters to Allah.
But see, journaling is also a way of venting it out, right?
Yes, that's true. And I think then another moment is that you randomly offer nawafil, because it is said in the Quran कि अल्लाह के ज़िक्र में ही सुकून रखा हुआ है दिलों का, right? So the best thing is that you call and have this conversation heart to heart with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that really helps you out. But obviously every person has a different connection with the nature, and nature responds differently to every other person. So some people says that their prayers are offered, and the moment they do it, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them with their prayers. But some people say that it takes their time to for their prayers to be to be offered in the first place, right? But having said so, I think this is a beautiful connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the nature, that we need to keep upkeeping, especially in a time when we are living in a very materialistic age where our attention span is really short, and I think we are in general are living in a very degenerate society as a whole, especially globally, because I feel that human civilization is going towards the moment where there are lots of positives, but there are also lots of negatives in the first place. But now moving on to our top stories, which is Prime Minister has visited the Jaramwala and addressing a gathering of the Christian community members in Jaramwala. He said that they would never condone the persecutors of minorities. The Prime Minister visited Jaramwala to express solidarity with the victim families of the Christian community and stress that if anyone caused harm to minorities, the laws of the country would take its course by ensuring that such like incidents should not happen in the future. And I think we certainly wanted to listen to such reassuring statements, that too coming from the head of the government in the first place, because whatever happened.
Definitely, Hajra, it was quite a heinous incident which occurred, and we were definitely, you're very right when you said that we were waiting for that. And I'm sure all the minority communities, they were also waiting for this, a statement, something, a reassurance from the government side. And also it was announced that they will be building their churches and their houses. Definitely, that's a great step by the government. And I think more such steps should be taken to assure the minorities that they're safe to live in this country, because we just celebrated our Independence Day. And I think it's all about living in unity and with cohesion, with love, with a lot of unity.
That's very true, and thank you for brilliantly putting it out there. So now moving on to our segment, which is Fahim alluded to in the first place, which is related to the literacy, which is related to the reading. And generally, I find it really frightening, because considering the fact that when we were growing up, Fahim, there was a lot of a book reading culture.
There was.
But now I hardly see that culture very vibrantly flourishing in Pakistan, because a lot of people, they've moved on to the social media with, you know, short words, lots of pictures, and with a short span of time. But obviously, when we talk about the literacy rate, this is a topic, and I think as a Pakistani, we should be more and more having this conversation on, especially when it comes to education, because education builds a nation altogether. So without any further ado, we would like to introduce our guest, who happens to be Miss Anza Akhund. She's a consultant, media and research, education, and she's with the Parliamentary Caucus. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for inviting me today. What a brilliant welcome. Thank you for speaking about literacy.
Yeah, I think that truly deserves it. But Ms. Ansa, let's kickstart a conversation. And the literacy rate in Pakistan is 62% according to our official statistics, right? Do you think this is an enough literacy rate? Do you think we still need to have the conversation? And when we are having the conversation, what should we be talking about? What next in the first place?
So, first of all, when you said the literacy rate is about 62%, do you know that actually the yardstick for it, for measuring it, is anybody who can read and write their own name? That could be in Urdu, in English, in Punjabi, Saraiki, whatever.
Yes.
So we're not even talking about to the matriculate
Absolutely,
level. Right.
absolutely. So that's what literacy here stands for. And to be honest, one of the pillars of democracy, you know, when you talk about voting and giving people the right to vote, so somebody who can only read and write their name, and we know how systems in this country, there's a lot of room for improvement. At the grassroots level, do you think people, unless they have a lot of literacy, unless there's about at least 80, 90, 100% literacy, do you think they're able to make an informed decision about who they should bring in power?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And, you know, those are maybe encouraging figures to hear. But how about this figure? There's still 23 million children that are out of school in Pakistan. And we've got one of the biggest youth bulges in the world right now. So children under the ages of 16, I mean, these are alarming figures, and this is what we have documented, 23 million children. A majority of that is female students. So there's, and then on top of that, we've got natural disasters. Look at the devastation that the floods alone caused in Sindh, Balochistan, in KP, in Chibi, in Chitral. Do you know how many schools were destroyed? And, you know, to be honest, to put forward an infrastructure for a public school, like let's say a primary government girls' school, it takes about 3 years minimum to put, you know, to rebuild a school building. So what are we doing today? And that is a matter of grave concern. And which is why, you know, even with the Education Parliamentary Caucus, I'm glad for the first time in Pakistan, after about 76 years, this Chairman Senate did take a great initiative of at least putting forward this subject. So we had the Women's Parliamentary Caucus, we had other caucuses, but nobody really spoke about education, which is one of the most pressing issues.
So, ma'am, when we talk about education, we can't deny the fact that we have and have to talk about the population growth as well. Pakistan stands as the 5th most populous country in the world, right? So when we talk about youth bulge, although there is a positive aspect to it, that there is a lot of energy and we have to channelize that energy in a proper manner, but At the same time, we have to channelize resources from the government side. We have to channelize them in building schools and perhaps giving, building some institutions which don't take perhaps 3 years, perhaps makeshift schools so that at least they can acquire some sort of education. Right?
Absolutely. So there's, it's very interesting. Your comment has, put forward two very interesting issues. Number one, where you spoke about the population explosion. So let's look at education and its social impacts, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about if those women, if you educate the mother, if you educate those families, there will be an automatic control over the population bulge, because obviously, they're better equipped to deal with how to allocate resources efficiently, practicing birth control, etc., etc. The other thing is that obviously when you talk about educating the girl child, right, you're inculcating this sense of females becoming contributing members to society.
True.
Hence that obsession with trying for a boy over and over again stops.
Yes.
You're going to be controlling social evils like, for instance, crime. So if we talk about a lot of the crime that has been prevalent, it's because people are not educated, don't get good enough jobs, aren't paid enough, are not able to appear. But that's what happens in the general public, right? And they're not even aware. So even if we talk about religiously driven crimes, I'm glad that a lot of the madaris in the Wafaqul Madaris board, so we've got the traditional schools, non-traditional systems as well, they have taken these steps to also inculcate, like, let's say, science and math and education of the world along with the curriculum. But there is still a lot of room for improvement, because what the kid is just learning is rote learning the scripture, the holy scripture, the Quran, rather than understanding the messages for peace and education and tolerance. The first revelation ever was Iqra, read in the name of thy Lord. There are a lot of evidences where talk about the importance of education in our religion. It is perceived as the counterforce of terrorism. So we're actually removing all these social evils, even malnutrition for that matter. A mother who knows what to eat, who's educated enough, will also be feeding her children correctly, right? So look at the greater impact. The second point that you brought forward was that yes, we need to think of different programs on, let's say that there has been a natural disaster that we could not control, and unfortunately due to climate change at the rate at which it's progressing in Pakistan, we've seen some massive destruction, and it would be unfair to just expect a magic wand that the government must come and overnight rebuild schools. So it's not going to happen. But I would like to appreciate a lot of work that some of the donor agencies are doing, like for example the INGOs. What they're doing is two things. So like for example, UNICEF is running this very interesting program called the Tent in a School, where they've sent tents, and they're fully functional schools. Then there's also some accelerated learning programs, so to cover up for the learning losses during, let's say, COVID. So what you're essentially doing is putting primary school children who've probably going to skip, let's say, grade 4 and 5, and just putting them in 6th grade with an accelerated curriculum. So over that 1 year they can cover up for all their learning losses and not have that setback. Then I think technology plays a very big role in the divide. I remember as kids, when we used to watch PTV, there used to be sections dedicated to, tele-school and science and everything. So it's not a novel concept. It's just something that maybe perhaps, I'll tell you this for the lack of a better example, but I've seen that. I was in Turkey recently to study their education structure, and I saw that the youth there is, even though they were having the elections, they're not obsessed with politics or who to support or who not to support. They were talking about where to apply for an application for a scholarship, what startup ideas they have. So, that's kind of what we need to inculcate even through the media.
And that's a whole different level of conversation, and I totally can relate to it, because I've also been to Turkey this year, and I've seen that conversations taking place. But Ms. Anza, let's talk about the literacy rate, and obviously our state has been making a lot of efforts to inculcate the literacy in their citizens, but obviously it needs a lot more to invest in them. But let's talk about some of the challenges that we face in increasing the literacy rate, right? So for example, in the lot lot of households, there's just general reluctance towards sending their kids, regardless of the gender, towards the school, because they just want them to go to some workshop, earn some skill, and then bring back some money back home, because there's so many kids out there and they have to feed all of them.
Sorry to interrupt, having had a conversation with some of the low segments of society, they say that the children are like an investment. They'll start earning from a very early age and start bringing money, so that we perhaps can get rid of abject poverty that we're living in. So yeah, your question holds true.
This entanglement between the poverty, between the ignorance, and between the illiteracy, how do we tackle that? Where do we stand in that?
So I think we need a multi-stakeholder partnership approach, right? So it's no longer the parliamentarians who can probably raise their voice in the assemblies for, let's say, a budget increase. After the 18th Amendment, education has become a provincial subject. You know that, right? So what happens in Sindh does not necessarily have to happen in KP. But at least I believe that organizations or maybe bodies like the Education Parliamentary Caucus, because the Senate is looking after things from a broader lens, they can really raise that voice and have that trickle down effect, have a whistleblowing policy. A lot of times even budgets that are allocated are not actually given to implement projects. The second thing that we need to take into account is involving the corporate sector. There are a lot of projects that we see. So let's say when we talk about poverty, there is a digital inequality, there's a digital divide. You don't have internet, you don't have access in a lot of these places, right? So obviously they want their kids to earn so they can pay, let's say, for the electricity bill or get access to safe water, get food. But what if the corporate sector resolves these issues for them? We've seen some great examples. We've seen a solar campaign by one of the big beverage giant in Thar. We've seen some campaigns for affordable housing. So if we have the corporate sector step in and play their part in taking away some of those problems, then again that obsession with I need my child to earn to be able to bring home a certain amount of food or labor expense to be covered, I think that'll be taken care of. The other thing that we need to do is involve the community leaders. So what I've seen in the West and why it's so attractive to a lot of the people because of the brain drain, it is because, it's a welfare sort of state, right? Something goes wrong in the community, you're not waiting for an intervention from, let's say, the parliamentarian from the area to come in, or, the community at large gets together, they go to the community leader. Hey, so this one person is suffering, they probably lost their house in a disaster, what can we do? And the community at large pools and resources, they'll probably have a fundraiser at a very, grassroots level. And they're going to be able to help, those people because they own them. I think that sense of ownership needs to be there. The fourth very important proponent is academics, right? So, a lot of the scholars, a lot of the research that we have in universities, for instance, you spoke about, they need breadwinners. They see investments in their children, right? So how about we get all our universities, HEC should be investing heavily. A lot of their funds are not allocated as well as of last year as well. A lot of the funds that were allocated to HEC for scholarships, for research purposes, if we start putting our funding into campaigns for, let's say, agricultural research or for studying models of different countries and how they've come out of poverty through education, I think that in itself is going to resolve a lot of these issues.
Right. And sorry for him, I'm interjecting you, but thank you so much for passionately speaking about education. And there was one point which you alluded to, and that was a very interesting point. And I would like to build up the conversation from there, which is about the vocational training, right?
Right.
So we were talking about how there's this reluctance, especially among the lower classes, not sending their children to the schools because they want them to get some sort of trainings. And I think vocational trainings are also very much important in a sense because they provide you with the skill which can really help you out. And in Pakistan, we do not see a lot of institutions that are offering them, right?
Absolutely.
There's a gap there. So please go ahead.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up that point because apart from the actual traditional schooling system, if we look at the models, the European models, even in England, BTech qualifications, HND qualifications. You know, people are studying to become electricians and plumbers, etc., construction workers, oil drilling. Here we do not have a lot of institutions providing that, especially on the government level. And vocational trainings are the way to go forward. You know, we really need to invest in this sector. I think a lot of people, there's also that narrative problem, right? When we talk to people in the villages and everything, and you tell them, hey, you know, you could, rather than putting your son into the traditional matriculation or into, you know, fields, why don't you just put him into a vocational course where he can become an AC technician, for example. He's going to say, no, if I'm going to be, you know, investing on my son's education. So that's that PR problem, not knowing that globally those kind of jobs are now highly in demand.
That's true.
Even if you talk about, I think now we're
I think in Pakistan they're also demand, because if you want to have some plumber over, they're so busy and VVIP that they would give you such a long time to come in, and that is why there's a lot of scope for that.
But you're right, Hajra, they would, and the VIP treatment is there. But as far as the payment is concerned, you're right, the demand is more in the West because they're paid well.
They're paid well because it's seen as a skill. And I said, like I said, we don't necessarily need to just invest in these particular skills, but for example, vocational training centers now, even at the governmental level, like TEFTA, that's great, but a majority of their courses are more like, for if you talk about females, okay, stitching and knitting and things like that, home economics sort of courses, and for the boys it's construction and carpentry and all of that, rather than actually making these people study skills like graphic designing. They could be working, they don't need a degree for that. They could actually be working on operating HVAC instruments. So rather than making your son or daughter actually go into becoming an AC technician, why not go into something that's more specialized? So operating like heavy machinery, we need to come up with those kind of courses, and I think that's what's going to bring about that change and give them that higher skilled worker level.
And also, Ms. Anza, let's also talk about religious seminaries. Although we know that they have started the science education as well, but the majority of them we still see, and like you were talking about, community leaders in most of the rural centers, we do see the religious scholars as the community leaders, right? So is the government doing anything so as to convince them properly, so as to spread this kind of scientific knowledge in the religious seminaries as well? Because I know for a fact that it has started, but how long do you think it would take that it would spread to the whole of the country?
So a lot of my work has been with the seminaries lately. We're doing an alternate project with them on you know, health and awareness of students. So, you know, teaching them things like biological changes that occur in a student's body, etc.
True.
So I have seen firsthand grassroots, you know, a lot of the Madaris boards. What we need to do is sort of also give them that incentive, because I think again there is that lack of communication and awareness. I met with the Council of Islamic Ideology lately, and they're doing some wonderful work where they're trying to introduce, you know, sports and co-curricular activities within religious seminaries as well. But you have to understand that in order to have that outreach on a major grassroots level, I think one area in which we're probably lacking is the use of technology, right? So you cannot open enough purpose-built madaris throughout Pakistan, but what you can do is start giving that education, empowering those particular religious seminary leaders, give them those sort of incentives to use technology-based educations, right? So all over the world, children are, you know, studying from apps at the moment, right? The world is happening, no longer happening. So why can't we gamify those apps where they're actually learning from the Quran as well? They have like proper curriculums where they're being taught about math and English and whatever else they need to function. Also, you know, I think that's one way in which we can really solve this problem. I think there also needs to be an inculcation or a revision of the curriculum there, right? So maybe not make it mandatory, but start incentivizing those things as well. So for instance, I've seen a lot of the private universities abroad. So if a child is coming from the madrasa stream of education, they know that if he's passed math and science and a couple of other subjects, they're going to offer him scholarships, right? So that is the incentive. So he knows that once I've done with my religious education, I can go into mainstream education as well.
Yes, mainstream, yes.
Right. Well, Miss Anza, it was definitely a pleasure having you here, talking to you. Because definitely this is something that needs to be spoken about. This is something about which more and more awareness needs to be created in our society in particular, because like Ms. Anza was mentioning that she has been to certain countries, like you were mentioning you have been to Turkey, and the approach to education over there is totally different. We need to get rid of the rote learning, and we need to get more and more into actual thinking, critical thinking, out of the box thinking, because that's what's going to take our children forward in the race of life ahead in the next generation.
Right. Thank you so much, Ms. Anza, once again for coming here, for having this wonderful cross-pollination of the ideas, especially when it comes to literacy, and for being so passionate about the subject that should be very close to everyone's heart, especially in Pakistan, right? So with that, we will wrap up our segment and we will go on a short break. Don't go anywhere, because after we come back, there's a very interesting discussion lined up.
Welcome back to World This Morning with Fahim Bangasha and Hajra Sati. Well, as we know, we were talking about literacy before the break, and we had a very wonderful and I think that was quite an intellectual discourse, as I would call it, because like Hajra said, it was a cross-pollination of ideas, and definitely taking these ideas forward in our network, I think we can spread this sort of awareness and knowledge among the people that we know, and perhaps create a change. We can start that, that little ray of hope that we have, that perhaps we can become like one of the developed countries one day.
Right, and I think one important key finding I would say that came out from that discussion was that how we need to invest on our youth, Fahim, right?
Absolutely.
Because obviously this investment is going to pay us in the long run, and around the world, across the world, they are vying for the young people, young population, and especially in Pakistan. So how to make our youth more confident is something that we are going to talk about, particularly when it comes to our students, particularly when it comes to the general people out there, and especially to the people who are very shy out there and introverts, who do have problem communicating a lot of things. And I do believe that the communication, good communication, is very much important, especially nowadays, which can make you or break you in the first place. So without any further ado, we are very glad that we have been joined by Asif Rasool. He happens to be a lecturer in Namal, and he is going to tell us some tips about how to make yourself confident. So assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for coming.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you very much.
Right.
It's a pleasure having you, sir. Asif Saab, charisma, confidence, communication, emotional intelligence. When we talk about all these things, these are, I would say, they encompass everything that would be in a very confident man and a very confident woman, right? So do you also teach these things to your students when you teach at the university as a teacher, because teacher is a role model?
True.
Well, thank you very much. You have rightly pointed out. It plays a very important role. For example, right now, if I just start off with my current class, I have seen like very talented boys and girls. They've got fantastic ideas. But whenever they came to share, there were lots of problems. So now after 2 months, I can see last day, I just saw like this one of my female student, like the way confidently she was standing and the way she was communicating her ideas. There was a huge change, and the way people, or even I, was listening to that female student, it really made a difference. Now, coming to this topic, charisma and confidence. Usually we ask people that how would you define or who is the charismatic person? So normally people, they just say that, well, perhaps my father or someone from family or among, but they're unable to properly define it. But there is this groundbreaking research of Preston University, and the researcher says that it's basically it's a blend, a beautiful blend of two qualities. One is warmth cues, and second one is this competence cues. So if when it comes to any speaker, whoever is going to strike the balance, or whoever is going to get into this sweet spot where they strike the balance of this warmth and competence, this equation is of this charismatic personality. Now, this one researcher, Edward, she's one of the fantastic speaker, Vanessa Edward. So she has just wrote a book as well. It's about cues, and she just saw, or her research is about Shark Tank. It's like one of the TV programs where different people go with their ideas. They just put up their ideas before the panel, and then they select. So she evaluated almost 595 pitches. And there she saw that what was the difference between most successful pitches and the least successful pitches. So she started out with this, like the moment somebody started moving in this hallway toward. So the first point was warmth, because if we see in hierarchy, with this charismatic, or when you are likable, approachable, and all that. So first of all, people are going to ask. They usually ask this question, okay, can I trust you? It's like one. One is when you just show likability, approachable, and all that. So all these speakers who just presented it very nicely, their ideas were appreciated and they were accepted and they were just bought. Right. So most of them, they showed this charisma when they just came in before the audience. So they showed that warmth. Second, they just very quickly, they just developed a very nice rapport with the shark, who were just ready to pounce upon them and all that. And third one was the body language, and especially their hand gesture. According to Vanessa Edward, when we talk about different posture, gesture, expression, hands are specifically the most important aspect. For example, when we started up with this program, and you were introducing this topic and before the audience, I was very minutely observing your hand gesture, and I saw like they were like very open, and the way you were, so whatever you were saying, your body language was also resonating with the one. So this is how, I mean, if let's say while sitting in that room, I was just watching your program, it was like on mute. So I could only just look at your facial expression, your body language, and from there I could deduce that, okay, are you comfortable with this topic? Okay, whatever you are saying, is it coming from your heart and all that? So this aspect, it plays a very important role. And the researcher also mentioned quadrant, 4 sections of this topic, that we have got like, if we divide it into 4 columns, or boxes. So we got like warm people, then we got like people in danger zone who are not warm, then we have got like competence, and third one is sweet spot, where the people who strike the balance. So now problem is people who are only warm and they show warmth, so they won't be accepted a lot. People are not going to buy their ideas very seriously and all that. So people who are very competent, but they do not show any warmth. We have seen in academia, like we just get doctors, PhD doctors, we got like people who are excellent, facts, figures, they're going to show, but they do not have warmth. Students, they do not enjoy their classes at all. Okay,
that's so true.
Then third one is like people who can strike the balance. They can feel the pulse. They exactly understand why, because as human beings, we evolved to to carry on our work inside the groups. So we are telegraphing information all the time. For example, I'm sending information to people and people are sending information to me. So it's very important for the charismatic people, first of all, to be very careful about their own body language.
But we are aware of the fact that not everyone can carry charisma because charismatic people are very few. But why do we need to talk about the confidence in the first place? And this is coming from a person who is very shy, who is very introvert, and especially nowadays in a digital century when we can seek refuge under the cocoon of the digital screens where you do not have to interact that much, and that certainly gives you a lot of comfort in the first place, right? So why do we need to talk about the confidence?
Well, in our part of the world, it's not very famous, this phenomena. But I have seen in Western
there are
world,
lots of freelancing.
Western world, we have got the system of like these podcasts. I mean, just look at why these people have got like all these top speakers. When they are communicating, they've got their views in millions.
Yeah.
What is it that just makes the difference between like the best people and the worst people? Why? Because when Shetty is talking, when this Vanessa Edward is talking, when like there are a host of people when they are communicating. Okay, even in shows, why we have got like Oprah Winfrey at top, we have got like certain people at the top, and then there are certain people are host or newscaster. I mean, there is a difference. So it really it plays a very important role. The ideas which you are going to communicate with the people, because it's not only like in this one aspect, we have got multiple aspects. For example, you've got to sit before the interviewer. So you've got to communicate. You go as a marketeer to market your product. You pitch your ideas. So for all these aspects, it's very important for you to understand. And for this, even in this book, Vanessa Edward shared a very beautiful example. I can show like two aspects of it. Like there is this guy, Jamie Simok. He just came to pitch his idea, but he was unable to get the attention of the shark because of his awkwardness, because of his like, he according to that quadrant of those boxes, he was in that danger zone. The expression or the bodily cues which he was communicating to the shark, they were not like comfortable. They didn't trust him. Even when they were like somewhere they were taunting, somewhere they were ridiculing, and he was unable to exactly understand that what sort of cue. Had he known, he could have fixed it and he could have addressed that problem. So, but after that, the beautiful, the other side of this story is the same guy. He just sold the same idea and Amazon bought it in like or acquired the same company Doorbell in 2018 and later he himself came as shark. But when second time he came, there was a huge difference. The moment he entered into the hallway, he just looked at everyone, he just smiled, he just shook hand with shark and very confidently sat. So we just got the two versions of the same guy. Hajar, this is 21st century. Same is happening.
Actually, so you're quite right, because we do see in many, you gave the example of the shark. I have seen many of the musical shows, Hajra, which you must have seen when people come in competitions.
True.
The first time that they come, it's totally different, and I have examples as well.
True.
But now that they're established singers, you look at them, you look at the air around them, it's totally different when they enter a room because they know how to communicate with the whole audience.
True,
they know how to communicate with the air around them. It's, yeah, that's true. So, but when we talk about youth, here we're talking about people who go on their path for a couple of years and then they become confident. Some people also say that charisma and confidence, it's an innate ability which is there since your childhood, because we do see many children who since their school age are very confident. So is this something that's a God-gifted ability in children or what?
Partially we can say that when it comes certain kids, well, perhaps right from very young age, because of the family environment, very sporting parenting and very sporting environment outside, inside the family and even in the school. So all these aspects, very quickly, they just develop their personality and all that. But we just get many examples. Even I've just listened to and I've just read about many people. Now they are top performers in their own field. Even this Vanessa Edward, she herself writes that I was a very awkward child. even at school, college, university. And then she said that I started going through different researches, and later I just developed. So it means that, well, some people have got because of the exposure and that, but later we can see a lot many people, after just going through all these aspects, we can see that people can develop. So that's why perhaps in Western world, people are into a lot many self-help books. One. Second, you can see the way the trainer, the coaches, I mean, just look at the Shiv Khera's audience. Just look at this, the very good Les Brown's audience. People are sitting in thousands, and believe me, the way they are just with rapt attention, they are listening to the speaker, and believe me, they have got their own, like the pads, they're just jotting it down, and from the facial expression, we can exactly see. I mean, they've got a very strong bonding with the speaker, and whatever the speaker is saying, it means they have got a lot of interest. And during this activity, we can easily understand that when people are sitting with this kind of posture, with this kind of mindset, they are into genuine kind of learning, and they really want to improve themselves.
Yes, and I think it takes a lot of confidence to develop that, and once you do that, certainly your communication will be on the right at the point, because I think there are lots of misunderstandings that are created because of the miscommunication, right? And that is why we need to have a confidence in what we say. So thank you so much, Asif.
And Asif, you also refuted the idea that this is an innate ability, and so now many of the people who are not quite confident, they have the hope, and they should definitely work towards it to become a confident and charismatic person, because I think all of us can do it.
That's very true, and we would like to wrap up our segment and say Allah Hafiz and bid you farewell. So until next time, it's a goodbye and good morning.